All right, so you want to learn to code?
Sounds pretty ambitious.
Well, I found this article called Why Building Projects Might Be a Waste of Time for Newbies.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too.
So are we ditching projects altogether?
Well, not exactly, but this article makes a pretty compelling case against jumping into them too soon.
Makes sense. Gotta walk before you can run, right?
Exactly. And the article lays out some pretty specific reasons why.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So, first things first, you know how everyone always says learn by doing is the best way to learn to code?
Yeah, that's like the golden rule, right? Build stuff, figure it out as you go.
Right, exactly. But this article kind of flips that on its head.
Hmm. I'm curious. Why is that?
Well, it argues that for beginners, that approach might actually backfire.
Really? Okay, now I'm really listening.
Yeah, it's pretty counterintuitive.
So why is learn by doing so popular in the first place? I mean, it makes sense to me. You get that hands-on experience.
Totally. You're applying what you learn, and you end up with something to show off, like a cool app or website.
Right, exactly. There's nothing like seeing your code come to life, even if it's just a simple program.
Yeah, that sense of accomplishment is a huge motivator, especially when you're starting out.
Okay, I'm with you so far, but what's the problem then?
Yeah. Well, the article claims that for newbies, diving headfirst into projects can actually do more harm than good.
Okay, I see where this is going.
So, reason number one, foundational knowledge.
All right, what do they mean by that?
Basically, it's like this, you wouldn't try to write a novel without knowing the alphabet, right?
Yeah, good point.
You need those basic building blocks to form words, sentences, and paragraphs.
It's like trying to build a house without knowing how to use a hammer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the same with programming. You need a solid understanding of the core concepts before you start trying to build complex things.
So things like variables, data types, loops, functions, that sort of thing.
Yep, those are the essential elements of any programming language.
Makes sense. Trying to build a complex project without that foundation is setting yourself up for a world of pain?
Exactly. You'll be hitting roadblocks left and right, not understanding why things aren't working, and probably ending up copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow without really knowing what it does.
Ugh, the dreaded copy-paste syndrome. I know it well.
It's like using a GPS to get somewhere without ever looking at a map. You might get to your destination, but you have no idea how you got there.
And what happens when the GPS goes haywire? You're totally lost.
Exactly. And that's kind of the second point the article makes. This approach can lead to an inefficient learning process.
Right. You might get something to work, but you're not really understanding the why behind it.
It's all about connecting the dots, right? Seeing how those core concepts work together.
Totally. And that brings us to point number 3, the risk of developing bad habits.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
When you're learning on your own without any guidance, you're more likely to pick up inefficient or even incorrect ways of coding.
It's like teaching yourself to play the guitar. You might figure out how to strum a few chords, but without proper technique, you'll hit a wall pretty quickly.
And in programming, those bad habits can lead to code that's difficult to read, understand, and maintain. It might work, but it'll be a nightmare for anyone else who has to work with it.
Okay, so we've got lack of foundational knowledge, inefficient learning, and bad habits. What's the fourth reason why jumping into projects too early could be a bad idea?
The article argues that a lot of those beginner projects out there neglect algorithmic thinking.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly?
It means they focus on simple applications that don't really push you to develop those problem-solving skills.
So you might be building stuff, but you're not necessarily training your brain to tackle more complex challenges.
Exactly. Think of it like learning to cook, and all you ever make is toast. Sure, you're technically cooking, but you're not exactly learning the skills you need to create a gourmet meal, are you?
Haha, I see your point. Toast is delicious, but it's not exactly pushing culinary boundaries.
Right. Algorithmic thinking is about understanding the strategies and techniques behind creating elegant and efficient solutions.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what's the final argument against diving into projects too soon?
This one's about focus, or rather, misaligned focus. For beginners, building projects often means wrestling with all sorts of technologies, frameworks, and tools.
Yeah, that can be overwhelming.
Exactly. And it can distract you from the core programming logic, which is what you should be honing at that stage. It's like trying to learn carpentry while simultaneously trying to figure out how to use a table saw, a drill, and a sander all at once.
You'd probably end up with more sawdust than anything else.
Precisely. The technical setup and configuration can become a major roadblock, especially when you're just trying to grasp the fundamentals of coding.
Okay, so if not projects are the way, what does the article recommend? What's the alternative path?
Well, it starts with mastering the fundamentals, but it goes beyond just reading about them in the textbook.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
We'll dive into those strategies next.
So we've talked about why diving into big projects right away might not be the best for new coders.
Right, especially if you're still getting a grasp on the basics.
So what's a better way to learn those fundamentals? Like, besides just reading a textbook, which can get boring.
Well, the article mentions these interactive learning platforms.
Okay, like what? What kind of platforms are we talking about?
There are some really great ones out there, like Algo Expert,
Yeah, I heard of that one.
Codecademy, Khan Academy.
Okay, yeah, familiar with those.
And this article specifically mentioned Algo Academy.
Algo Academy. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what makes them so good for learning?
Well, I mean, they're a lot more engaging than just like reading a book, right?
Right, yeah, you want something to keep you hooked.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do they do differently?
Well, for one, they usually offer a structured learning path.
Okay, so you're not just jumping around randomly between different concepts.
Right, you're following a curriculum that builds on itself.
Okay, so like each lesson kind of prepares you for the next one.
Exactly. And they also often have a ton of hands-on coding exercises.
Oh, nice. So you're actually getting to write code from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. And quizzes, little mini projects, things like that.
So it's not just theory, it's actually applying what you've learned.
Right, which is super important. That's how it really sticks.
That sounds way more fun than just reading a dry textbook.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Much more engaging.
And it probably helps keep you motivated too, right?
Definitely. And on top of all that, a lot of these platforms even have AI-powered tutors now.
Whoa, AI tutors. That sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
So like you can actually talk to an AI that helps you understand coding.
It's not exactly like having a casual conversation.
Right, right.
But it's pretty close.
So how does it work?
Well, these AI tutors can analyze your code,
Okay,
point out any errors you've made,
that's helpful.
suggest improvements,
Oh, wow.
even explain things in different ways if you're not getting it.
So it's kind of like having a personalized coding coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Available 24/7.
That's amazing. So even if you're learning solo, you don't have to feel completely alone.
Right. And that actually reminds me, the article didn't explicitly mention this, but I think it's really important for newbie coders to find a community.
Yeah, good point. Having a support system can make all the difference.
Especially when you inevitably hit those frustrating roadblocks.
Totally. It's good to know you're not alone in the struggle.
Exactly. Connecting with other learners, asking questions, getting feedback, it can really help with motivation and progress.
Okay, so where do you find these communities? Are we
Mm.
talking online forums, local meetups?
All of the above, really.
Okay, cool.
There are so many online communities out there dedicated to programming.
Like where? Give me some examples.
Well, there's Reddit, of course.
Yeah, good old Reddit.
Tons of forums and subreddits for all sorts of programming topics.
Right, gotta love Reddit.
And Discord servers.
Oh yeah, those are popular too.
And dedicated platforms like Stack Overflow.
Stack Overflow, that's the one where you can ask and answer coding questions, right?
Exactly. It's a goldmine for finding solutions to specific coding problems.
And you can also connect with people there, right?
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So it's not just a Q&A site, it's also a community.
Right, exactly. And don't forget about those in-person meetups and workshops.
Oh yeah, those are great for actually meeting other learners face to face.
Definitely. You can find them in a lot of cities now.
Cool, cool.
So yeah, the point is you don't have to go it alone.
I'm starting to feel a lot less intimidated by this whole coding thing.
Good, that's the goal.
It's not just about locking yourself in a room and staring at a screen until you go cross-eyed.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's more to it than that.
It's about finding those resources, connecting with the community, and yeah, having some fun along the way.
Exactly. Speaking of which, remember those coding challenge websites we talked about?
Yeah, like LeetCode and HackerRank. Those are great for putting your skills to the test.
Exactly. And they're super helpful for preparing for those technical interviews, especially if you're aiming for those big tech companies.
Right, those FAing companies everyone dreams of working for.
Exactly. They love to ask those tricky algorithm and data structure questions.
Okay, so how do those coding challenge websites help with that?
Oh, they offer a huge library of coding challenges, from basic to super challenging.
Okay, so something for every skill level.
Yeah, precisely. And they cover a lot of the same topics that come up in those FAing interviews.
Like what?
Things like algorithms, data structures, dynamic programming, all those fun things.
Fun might be a stretch for some people, but I get what you mean.
Haha. Yeah, it depends on your definition of fun.
So it's about pushing yourself and seeing what you're capable of.
Exactly. And the best part is these platforms usually give you instant feedback on your code.
Oh, that's nice, so you can see if you're on the right track.
Right. You can see if your solution works, how efficient it is, and where you can improve.
So it's like having a virtual sparring partner for your coding brain.
I like that analogy.
So you're constantly learning and getting better.
Precisely. Now, one thing that the article really emphasized is understanding those algorithms.
Yeah, algorithmic thinking, that seems like a key skill for any programmer.
It is, absolutely.
But how do you actually learn that? Like, how do you go beyond just memorizing the steps and actually understand the logic behind them?
That's a great question, and it can be tricky.
Yeah, algorithms can be pretty abstract.
They can be, but one approach that I find helpful is to try visualizing the algorithm.
Visualizing? Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's about creating a mental model of how the algorithm processes data.
So like drawing pictures of code or something?
Not quite pictures of code, but more like diagrams or flowcharts that show the steps involved.
Okay, so instead of just seeing it as a bunch of abstract code, you're actually creating a picture in your mind of how it works.
Exactly. And once you have that visual representation, it becomes a lot easier to understand the logic behind it.
That makes sense.
Another thing you can try is to explain the algorithm to someone else.
Like, pretend I'm your rubber duck and explain it to me.
Exactly. The act of explaining something out loud can really help solidify your understanding.
So find a friend, a family member, or even a rubber duck and make them your coding student.
Haha, exactly.
Okay, I love it.
So we've talked about interactive platforms, coding challenges, finding a community, strategies for understanding algorithms. What else?
There was that one about reading code, right?
Oh, yeah, that's an important one.
But reading other people's code, that sounds kind of intimidating.
It can be, especially at first, but it's like learning to write by reading great literature.
Okay, yeah, you're exposed to different styles and techniques.
Exactly. And by reading code written by experienced programmers, you can get a glimpse into how they approach problems, how they structure their code, and how they write code that's easy to read and understand.
So you're learning not just the mechanics of coding, but also the art of it.
Exactly.
But where do you even find good code to read?
Open source projects are a great place to start.
Open source. Remind me what that means again.
It's code that's freely available for anyone to use, modify, and distribute.
So like I could actually read the code that powers some of the apps and websites I use every day.
Often, yes. And there are tons of open source projects out there, from small personal projects to massive collaborative efforts.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is. And you can learn a lot by seeing how real-world projects are structured and how they handle different challenges.
Okay, so it's kind of like that learn by doing approach, but without the pressure of building something from scratch.
You got it.
All right, so we've covered interactive platforms, coding challenges, communities, understanding algorithms, and reading code.
And one more thing, maybe the most important piece of advice.
Okay, hit me with it.
Start small.
I like that.
Don't try to build the next Facebook right out of the gate.
Right, keep it simple.
Exactly. Focus on one concept at a time. And build small, focused projects that allow you to apply what you've learned.
So like a simple calculator app or a to-do list.
Exactly.
Okay, that sounds way less daunting.
Right. It's about building confidence and momentum with those early wins.
So you can prove to yourself that you can actually code and solve problems.
Precisely. And once you have that foundation, you can gradually increase the complexity of your project.
So like level up your coding skills.
Exactly. It's like a video game. You wouldn't start with the final boss battle, right?
Right, got to work your way up.
Exactly.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. We've talked about alternative learning strategies, finding a community, understanding algorithms, reading code, and starting small. But there's one more thing that's really revolutionizing the coding world that we need to explore.
AI, right?
Yeah, AI. This is where things get really interesting.
It is. AI is changing how we learn and how we code, and I think you'll be amazed at what it can do.
Right, so we've learned a ton about learning to code.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But let's get real. The end goal for a lot of people is landing that dream job at a top tech company.
Yeah, those FAAing companies everyone's talking about.
Exactly. So how do we prepare for those notoriously tough interviews?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand what those companies are looking for.
Okay, what do they want?
They want problem solvers, people who can think critically and come up with efficient solutions.
So it's not just about memorizing a bunch of algorithms.
No, not at all. While knowing common algorithms is helpful,
Right.
it's more about how you approach problems.
Okay, so how do you recommend preparing for those interviews?
Practice, practice, practice.
Okay, but practice what?
Well, those coding challenge websites we talked about are a great place to start.
Like LeetCode and HackerRank?
Exactly. Those platforms will give you a taste of what those technical interviews are like.
So it's like a virtual boot camp for your coding skills.
Yeah, something like that.
But it's not just about grinding through as many problems as possible, right?
No, it's about quality over quantity.
So take your time, understand the problem, think it through.
Exactly. Don't just rush to get the right answer.
Think about the efficiency of your solution. Consider different approaches.
Right, exactly. And don't forget about those structured learning platforms.
Oh yeah, those can be helpful too, right?
Definitely. A lot of them have dedicated interview prep tracks.
So they might have modules on algorithms, data structures.
System design, even behavioral questions.
So it's like a one-stop shop for interview prep.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, this is all super helpful, but I gotta be honest, those FAing interviews still sound pretty intimidating.
I get it. They have a reputation.
So any advice for calming those pre-interview jitters?
Well, remember that it's okay to not know everything.
Wait, really? I thought you had to be like a coding god to work at those companies.
Nobody knows everything, not even those interviewers.
Okay, that's good to know.
What they really want to see is how you think, how you approach problems.
So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. If you're stuck, just say so.
Okay, that takes some of the pressure off.
And talk through your thought process, explain your reasoning.
Got it.
They want to see that you can communicate effectively.
That makes sense.
So just relax, be yourself, and show them what you can do.
Okay, I'll try to remember that when I'm sweating bullets in the interview room.
I know it's easier said than done, but try to enjoy the challenge.
I will. Thanks for all the tips.
No problem. Happy to help.
So just to wrap things up,
Yeah, let's recap.
we've debunked the myth that you have to start with big projects to learn to code.
Right. We've explored alternative learning strategies, talked about finding a community, understanding algorithms, reading code, and starting small.
And we've even delved into the exciting world of AI and how it can help you learn and prepare for those tough tech interviews.
We've covered a lot of ground, but the most important thing is to remember that learning to code is a journey.
Yeah, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Exactly. There will be challenges, there will be frustrations, but don't give up.
It's all part of the process.
And remember, the tech world is constantly evolving, so be adaptable, be curious, and never stop learning.
I think that's a great note to end on.
To our listener out there, we hope you found this deep dive helpful and inspiring.
Good luck on your coding journey. We can't wait to see what amazing things you create.
And remember, have fun along the way.
Happy coding.